For decades, Tania the Guerrilla existed more as a footnote than a person. In photographs, she appeared briefly. In official histories, she was often reduced to a role. Rarely was she examined as an individual whose choices were deliberate, calculated, and deeply consequential. Her real name was Tamara Bunk. She was born far from Latin America, raised in a politically conscious environment, and educated with discipline and purpose. From an early age, she was shaped by ideology but also by structure. She spoke multiple languages, understood codes, and learned how to operate quietly within systems rather than against them. This background would later define the way she moved through revolutionary spaces. When she entered the Cuban Revolutionary Circle, she did not arrive as a fighter. She arrived as an asset. Her intelligence, linguistic ability, and social awareness made her valuable in ways that were not immediately visible. She blended easily into environments that others could not penetrate. She observed, listened, and remembered. This made her indispensable long before she ever carried a weapon. According to accounts from those who knew her, Tania did not see herself as exceptional. She viewed her role as necessary. While others sought recognition through action, she operated through invisibility. This distinction would later place her closer to Che Guevara than most people realized. Che did not initially see Tania as a companion or confidant. He saw her as capable. Over time, however, proximity created familiarity. Familiarity created trust. And trust, in the context of secrecy and constant danger, created a bond that went beyond assignment. Their relationship was never publicly defined while they were alive. There were no official acknowledgments, no recorded declarations. What existed between them was understood only within a narrow circle. After their deaths, that ambiguity became fertile ground for speculation. Some dismissed it entirely. Others romanticized it excessively. The truth lies somewhere in between. What is clear is that Tania chose to follow Che not out of obligation, but conviction. She had opportunities to remain behind. She had the skills to serve from a distance. Yet she insisted on joining the Bolivian campaign, despite understanding the risks more clearly than most. This decision marked a turning point. By choosing to move from intelligence work into direct engagement, Tania crossed a boundary that few others did voluntarily. She accepted a role that offered no protection and no guarantee of survival. Those who later reflected on her choice described it not as impulsive, but resolved. Tania understood the conditions in Bolivia. She understood the lack of local support, the fragile communication lines, and the growing isolation of Che's group. Unlike many, she did not arrive with illusions. She arrived with awareness. This is why her presence mattered. She was not there because she was misled. She was there because she accepted the same outcome Che had begun to accept. Her loyalty was not blind. It was informed. In the next part, we will examine how Tania's role evolved inside the Bolivian operation, how her closeness to Che shaped her fate, and why her decision to stay ultimately sealed her end. Tania's decision to remain with Che's group in Bolivia was not driven by emotion alone, nor was it the result of misunderstanding the danger. According to those who later reconstructed the events, she was among the few who understood the situation with clarity. Her background in intelligence work gave her an advantage others lacked: the ability to read absence as information. By the time the Bolivian operation was fully underway, the warning signs were already visible. Local support was limited. Communication with external contacts was unreliable. The environment was hostile, not only geographically but politically. Tania recognized these issues early and adjusted her behavior accordingly. She reduced unnecessary exposure, limited conversations, and became increasingly cautious in her movements. Despite this awareness, she refused opportunities to step back. Accounts suggest that she was advised to withdraw from the front lines and return to a safer role. Such a move would have preserved her value as an operative and increased her chances of survival. Tania rejected this option. The reason, according to later testimonies, was consistency. Tania believed that withdrawing while others remained would contradict the principles she claimed to uphold. Her commitment was not to a single individual but to the integrity of shared risk. Remaining behind would have separated her fate from Che's, and that separation was something she was unwilling to accept. Her closeness to Che intensified this resolve. While the nature of their relationship has been debated, what is not disputed is the level of trust between them. Che relied on Tania not only for logistical support but for perspective. She provided insight without flattery and loyalty without dependency. In an environment where uncertainty was constant, that reliability mattered. As pressure increased, Tania's role shifted. She was no longer functioning primarily as an intelligence asset. She became part of the operational core, sharing the same shortages, the same exhaustion, and the same vulnerability as the rest of the group. This transition removed any remaining buffer between her and the dangers of the mission. Witnesses later described her behavior during this period as composed and deliberate. She did not seek attention, nor did she express regret. She continued to carry out assignments with precision, even as conditions deteriorated. This consistency reinforced Che's trust in her and further integrated her into the group's fate. Tania was fully aware that the mission was collapsing. She understood that the possibility of success was diminishing rapidly. Yet she did not frame this as a reason to abandon it. Instead, she viewed it as a test of commitment. Survival, in her view, was not the ultimate measure of purpose. Her decision to stay cannot be separated from Che's own acceptance of the situation. Both recognized that the Bolivian campaign was isolated and compromised. Both continued forward regardless. This parallel choice bound their outcomes together, not romantically but structurally. As military pressure intensified, the group fragmented. Movement became slower. Resources disappeared. The sense of inevitability grew. Tania, like Che, adapted rather than resisted. She focused on immediate responsibilities and avoided speculation about the future. Those who later analyzed her actions concluded that Tania did not stay because she believed they would win. She stayed because leaving would have required denying the reality she had already accepted. In that sense, her loyalty was not blind. It was conscious. In the next part, we will examine how this choice placed Tania in direct danger, how operational decisions exposed her position, and how her death became one of the most overlooked moments of the Bolivian campaign. As the Bolivian campaign deteriorated, Tania's position within the group became increasingly exposed. What had once been her strength, mobility, adaptability, and access, now placed her in direct danger. The same skills that allowed her to move unnoticed in earlier phases of the operation became liabilities once the group was under constant surveillance. By this stage, the guerrilla unit was no longer operating as a single cohesive force. It had fragmented into smaller elements, each struggling to survive under growing military pressure. Communication between these elements was inconsistent, and movement became unpredictable. Tania was assigned to a separate column, a decision that would prove decisive. This separation was not intended as a demotion or punishment. It was an operational adjustment. The intent was to preserve flexibility and maintain contact across different zones. However, it also removed Tania from Che's immediate proximity, placing her in a unit with fewer resources and less protection. According to later reconstructions, this shift marked the moment when Tania's fate became largely unavoidable. The column she joined was operating with limited intelligence and minimal external support. The terrain offered little concealment, and local hostility had increased. Informants were active, and patrols were frequent. Tania understood these risks. Witnesses from the group later recalled that she did not protest the assignment. She accepted it without argument, fully aware of the implications. Her acceptance was consistent with her earlier choices. She did not seek exceptions or special treatment. The operational environment worsened rapidly. Food shortages intensified. Medical supplies were scarce. Movement was slowed by exhaustion and injury. The group's ability to evade detection declined with each passing day. Tania's presence, once an advantage, now added complexity. As a woman and a known figure within revolutionary circles, she attracted attention that the group could no longer manage. Despite this, there is no evidence that Tania attempted to withdraw or surrender. Accounts indicate that she remained focused on her immediate responsibilities, assisting others when possible and maintaining discipline under extreme stress. Her behavior during this period reinforced the perception that she had fully accepted the risks associated with her role. The ambush that led to her death was not sudden. It was the result of accumulated exposure and deteriorating conditions. The group was detected while attempting to cross a river, a vulnerable moment that offered little opportunity for defense or escape. Bolivian forces, acting on intelligence and local cooperation, were prepared. When the attack occurred, there was no confusion about what was happening. The group was outmatched and outnumbered. Resistance was brief and ineffective. Tania was killed during this encounter, along with several others. The circumstances were unremarkable from a military perspective, but their implications were profound. Her death did not produce immediate acknowledgement. It was not publicly emphasized, nor was it framed as a significant loss at the time. Within the broader narrative of the campaign, her fate was overshadowed by subsequent events, including Che's capture and execution. This marginalization is central to understanding why Tania's story remained incomplete for decades. She did not fit easily into simplified narratives. She was neither a distant supporter nor a passive follower. She was an active participant whose decisions placed her directly in harm's way. In retrospect, her death represents more than a battlefield casualty. It reflects the consequences of structural isolation, operational compromise, and ideological consistency. Tania did not die because she misunderstood the danger. She died because she remained aligned with a mission she knew was failing. In the final part, we will examine what was revealed about Tania's relationship with Che after their deaths, how her role was reshaped by later interpretations, and why the truth about her choices only emerged decades later. For decades after Tania's death, the official record remained limited and selective. Her role was acknowledged, but not examined. References to her presence in Bolivia were brief, often vague, and stripped of personal detail. She appeared as a symbol rather than a subject, her choices reduced to a single outcome rather than a process. This was not accidental. In the years following the collapse of the Bolivian campaign, attention focused almost entirely on Che Guevara's final days. His capture and execution dominated the narrative, leaving little room for those who had moved alongside him. Tania's story was absorbed into that larger frame and effectively disappeared within it. What changed 50 years later was not a single discovery, but a gradual release of context. Private letters, internal notes, and testimonies from surviving participants began to surface. Together, they revealed a more complete picture of Tania's role and the nature of her relationship with Che. These records did not confirm a simplistic romantic narrative. They revealed something more complex. Tania and Che were connected through trust, shared responsibility, and mutual recognition of risk. Their bond was not defined by sentiment alone, but by alignment. They understood the same limitations, accepted the same consequences, and continued forward with the same awareness. One of the most revealing aspects of these materials was how consistently Tania had expressed clarity about her choices. There was no evidence that she felt misled or pressured. On the contrary, her correspondence suggested a clear understanding of the mission's deterioration and a conscious decision to remain regardless. This undermines later interpretations that portrayed her as a victim of circumstance or emotion. Tania was neither naive nor reckless. She was methodical, informed, and deliberate. Her death was not the result of confusion. It was the result of persistence in the face of accepted risk. The records also showed how her story was reshaped after the fact. By minimizing her agency, later narratives preserved a simplified version of events that emphasized heroism without complication. Acknowledging Tania's full role would have required acknowledging the broader structural failures of the mission and the acceptance of those failures by its leadership. 50 years later, this context changes how her death is understood. It does not elevate it into myth, nor does it reduce it to tragedy. It places it within a framework of decision-making where loyalty, conviction, and acceptance intersected. Tania the Guerrilla did not die because she was unaware of the danger. She died because she chose not to separate herself from it. Her connection to Che was not defined solely by affection, but by a shared refusal to withdraw when withdrawal became the rational option. This perspective does not romanticize her fate. It respects her autonomy. By revisiting her story with access to fuller records, her legacy shifts. She emerges not as an accessory to Che's narrative, but as a figure whose choices carried equal weight. Her silence in death mirrored the silence that surrounded her life, and only time allowed that silence to be examined rather than accepted. The truth revealed 50 years later is not dramatic in the conventional sense. It is unsettling in its simplicity. Tania stayed because she believed that stepping away would have betrayed her own understanding of responsibility. And in that choice she defined her place in history,